Hey Project Fam, thank you for watching another video. In this video I'm going to show you the key to growing a ton of healthy tomatoes. And yeah, it has to do with sunlight and getting the proper amount of water, but also as your plant is growing, you've got to treat it right. There I am making sure that my leaves are staked properly, because as soon as they start growing tomatoes, they're gonna droop even more, and that's how your plant breaks and your plant is unhealthy. So as the tomato plant grows, you stake it. If you've been watching my videos, you'll know that I actually have two tomato cages there. I have a traditional tomato cage, the blue one you see there, and then I took another tomato cage, turned it upside down, and zip tied that cage to the top of the existing cage. So now I have two very tall cages, but that's not enough. The next thing I did was I zip tied or tied down the tomato cages to the railing or just anything to keep this whole thing standing up, because it's one thing to keep it straight when there are no tomatoes on the vines, but once those tomatoes get on the vine, you need some support. And then if you have some bad weather and you get some wind and it starts blowing those tall tomato cages, it'll topple that entire container. So I have this tomato plant growing inside a container, a patio container. It's called, what is it called? I don't remember. It'll come to me. City Pickers, that's it. I bought it from one of the big box stores. It just happened to be Home Depot at this point. And I love my City Picker bucks, but that's not why we're here. We're not here to talk about the City Picker patio container. We're here to talk about tomatoes and growing tomatoes. So what I'm doing now is I am pruning my tomatoes. So the easiest way to think about it is any tomato branch that is growing downward toward the ground or toward the earth, I'm going to cut off. So those who grow tomato plants will probably know that you have suckers. You have suckers on a tomato plant. That's the little leaf that grows in between two leaves. So if you put your fingers up, get 3 fingers up, the sucker is in the middle. And then you have the one on top and the one on the bottom. So I cut the leaf off in the bottom, and then at some point we'll probably even talk about the suckers, the one in the middle. So here I am. Another reason to prune a tomato bush is so the tomatoes that are growing on the vine can get some sunlight and so they can ripen. You know, the goal is, and I read this somewhere, is not to grow leaves, it's to grow tomatoes. And I feel as though every time I cut off one of these tomato branches, it's going to add more power to the plant. It's going to send a signal to the plant to grow more, because there's a ton more room to grow. And you might think I'm cutting off a lot, but this is necessary to send more power to the plant. And tomatoes not crazy. Let me tell you something about a tomato plant. A tomato plant will take care of itself. If you don't water your tomato plant, you'll notice that it's going to start to yellow from the bottom, and all the leaves toward the bottom of the plant are going to turn yellow, brown, and fall off. That's because the tomato plant is saving all of its power for the tomatoes up top and the leaves up top. So it will sacrifice the bottom parts of the tomato plant just to make sure the top part of the plant has enough nutrients to actually grow tomatoes and ripen those tomatoes. It sacrifices itself. So here I am now at the bottom of the plant, and after I've already harvested a few hundred tomatoes, a lot of tomatoes from the plant, they're no longer going to grow at the bottom of the plant. So what I'm doing now is I'm trimming off these leaves at these branches at the bottom of the plant, because we're not going to grow any more tomatoes down there. The only thing it's going to do is produce more leaves. And frankly, if I do get some more suckers that happen to grow down there, it's not going to produce any tomatoes. So, is it time to eat? Did I eat that? I ate that. So you can see that I'm just cutting the branches and I'm throwing them over the deck. I will mulch them with the lawnmower when I mow the lawn. So what I did was I trimmed 3 plants. Those plants are over 10 feet tall, and I am still trimming. What I should do is show a before and after so you can really see what I'm doing. But for the most part, I need to be able to see the tomatoes that are growing, because if I can see the tomatoes growing, then I know the tomatoes will get sun and they will ripen. But if the tomatoes are hiding behind leaves, then they're not going to ripen. And chances are they're going to rot on the vine before even getting ripe. So as I'm cutting and I'm cutting and I'm cutting, I usually say I'm going to cut really fast because I like to trim it a lot. And when I realize that I've cut too much, like by accident, I cut off some tomatoes, then either I quit or I slow down. So that long pause you just saw, yeah, I just cut off some tomatoes and I didn't like that. So I'm going to slow down now and pay more attention to what I'm doing. But again, so what am I cutting? I am cutting right now the leaves that are growing downwards. I am cutting the leaves that do not have tomatoes growing on them. I wanted to keep this video rolling as much as possible so you can see how much I am trimming off this tomato bush. It's a lot. Tomatoes are very resilient. Even if I break a tomato vine, if I put it back in place, it'll still grow. Like tomato, I've said it a million times, it's a weed, man. It's hard to kill a tomato plant. So here I am. This is the key to growing very tall and healthy tomatoes. All right, now here's the gem. For those who hang out and stuck around, I'm going to tell you the real keys to growing tall tomatoes. For all you that left within the first 6 minutes, you're going to miss out. So the key is, number 1, I fertilize once at the beginning of the season when I plant inside the city picker container. The second key is not to plant too many plants inside this container, because the tomato plant needs nutrients. And if you plant anything else in this container, it's not going to work. That other plant will not grow. All right. Look into companion plants, and you could do that. But for the most part, I don't plant any plant in the same area or the same soil as a tomato plant. A tomato plant needs all the nutrients possible for it to grow. Third thing is, as a tomato plant is growing, pluck off the suckers. Get rid of the suckers. If you don't know what the suckers are, I guess you got to tune in for next year when I do tomatoes, or look it up on Google. Another key to growing a tall tomato plant is stake it early. Put a brace in it early. You don't want your tomato plant growing without a tomato cage. So not a brace. Put a cage on it early. So I put my cage on it as soon as I plant it, and let that tomato plant quickly grow within the cage. Another key is, every 3 or 4 days, make sure the tomato plant is growing within the cage. You have to keep tucking it inside the cage. If not, the tomato plant will grow outside the cage, and frankly, the cage serves no purpose. Another key to growing a healthy tomato plant is, it needs sunlight and it needs water. Tomatoes do not grow in shade. They do not grow if you don't add water. If you don't water a tomato plant, it'll sacrifice the plant to make sure you get tomatoes, and the plant will die. So you need light, you need water. And the final key to growing successful tomatoes is just pruning your tomato bush. As you can see, the more I prune, the more tomatoes you'll be able to see, and that's what you want. You want to be able to see tomatoes, and if you can see tomatoes, the sun can also ripen the tomatoes. If you follow all of those steps, you will grow tomatoes. And then we didn't even talk about the types of tomatoes. So I am growing cherry tomatoes. One thing I like about cherry tomatoes is they're like little desserts. I can pop in my mouth. I can eat them all the time. Cherry tomatoes are not heavy like a standard tomato. A heavy tomato, a beefsteak or a Roma tomato, those are heavy tomatoes. And heavy tomatoes will grow heavy on the vine. And heavy vine tomatoes need better bracing and better tomato. There's my essential belt. Check that out. Look at that. Shout out to Essential Belt, Nurse Shaw. Big shout out. One of these days we'll do I'll give her a little bit more promotion on what she has. But that Essential Belt has all of the keys that I need to work in the garden. Everything I need to stake that tomato plant to make it look pretty is on my hip, on my Essential Belt. Oh, and when you think you're done, you're not. You're still pruning this tomato bush. As always, Project Fam, thank you so much for watching. I hope it was educational. I'm sure it was somewhat entertaining. I have a lot more videos coming out. If you're new, please subscribe. If you're a part of my OG Project Fam, you know another video is coming out.